everyone, and welcome to a new episode of It's Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, what are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guest of this series will show you by example that not only does feminism have a potential to change the world, they're actually doing it. My name is Aurora, I will be your host, and joining me today is Paula to talk to us about the importance of sexual education and pleasure and what it's like to seek education in different countries around the world. Just want to make a quick disclaimer that this is a safe space, so no type of hate speech or violence will not be tolerated, but you're more than welcome to indulge in the discussions in the comments down below, to ask questions, give critique where critique is due, but just make sure to be kind because being kind is free, so we can all do it very easily. So why not start here? And if you enjoy watching this, maybe leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss on any future uploads. Paula, welcome and thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure and a little bit daunting to hear all the big questions we have to answer.
Yeah, we'll try to answer them like subtly through examples so that people can actually see what you do, what your life looks like, what are your values, and that will help them to answer those questions for them. So we will demystify what feminism is, even though we're going to be talking about sexuality for the most part, which is one of the topics that mostly pops to people's minds when they think about feminism, right? Tell us where you are now, both location wise and career wise.
I'm currently in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, where I graduated from my master's in gender studies about a year ago now. And 2 months ago, I started working full time at a feminist women's fund. But besides that, for a number of years now, I've been working in spaces of comprehensive sexuality education, advocacy for comprehensive sexuality education in Croatia, kind of demystifying feminism, particularly from the position of intersectional feminism and queer feminism, um, focusing mostly on open dialogues with adults.
That's amazing. I love how you managed to find an actual career in the field of feminism.
Like, what can you do with a degree in gender studies? Well, it's actually funny that the organization I am employed with now, I think 4 or 5 of us have finished the same masters in gender studies from the same university. So we all kind of go to that one spot we know has interest in that kind of knowledge. Besides that, I would say, like, if you're unable to find a position that really works with, queer, feminist, women's spaces, which oftentimes it is difficult. There aren't a lot of organizations, a lot of spaces that do that kind of work and that actually have money and resources to hire people full time. So unless that kind of magically happens for you, I would say it is a lot of hustling and a lot of trying to make things work. And that is definitely like where my freelancing came in. I was always just active in feminist activism, specifically active in pro-sex feminism, talking about these things, and then opportunities for projects started arising, but not necessarily opportunities for full-time employment, which is, not the best. As part of my philosophy, I'm definitely for workers' rights and, safety in terms of financial stability and work stability. And that definitely isn't the case when you're a freelancer and when you're working from project to project.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard for all of us currently in this late stage of capitalism where everything is falling apart to get a stable job. But I believe that there are some skills that we learn in gender studies that can translate well into other workplaces. But the problem is that we have a very specific set of values that has to be aligned in the work culture so that we want to work, because feminism and exploitation don't really go well together, or feminism and discrimination in the workplace. There's a lot of tension there, so it's hard to find perhaps a place where you you can be a feminist in the workspace, not just no feminist stuff in the workplace.
While it is true to kind of be, hold your values dear and be true to your values, there is also truth in that you have to survive. And sometimes, you have to be employed by a corporation that you don't necessarily agree with and bite your tongue and get through it to get the money to be able to survive. So I just wanted to say that so that people don't feel bad about themselves if they do have feminist values, but are working in spaces where they can't actually, show those values or practice them. It is a balance, and it is I think a personal like thought process of where you can show your values and where you can really like stick to them. I would say, maybe dating is a place where you should stick to your values because you are kind of choosing your partner. Whereas in workspaces, if there isn't an opportunity right now for being a part of a very feminist, very egalitarian workspace, like don't beat yourself up for, biting your tongue and getting the cash.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with fast fashion or with sustainability in fashion because a lot of us want to boycott fast fashion, but sometimes you can't afford otherwise, so you shouldn't beat yourself up because there are other people who should be held more accountable for it, let's say. So, you studied in Netherlands, but you also studied in other places around the world. So, can you please tell us more about those experiences of what it's like to study in different countries, what it's like to move to different countries to seek education, and what are your thoughts on the geographies of knowledge production?
Well, to start at the beginning, I'm from Croatia, so in Europe, part of European Union, and my higher education was from the very beginning abroad. I never went to university, never went to college in Croatia. Right after I graduated at 18, I went to a university based in Abu Dhabi, an American university, New York University, Abu Dhabi, and I did my undergrad in social research and public policy there. After that, I came back to Croatia for 2 years to work in activism and feminism, exactly what we were just talking about, and to see if that is possible and doable. It turns out it wasn't very possible and doable for me, just from the emotional and psychological side. Being in Croatia was draining me out, and it was a lot of burden, and I realized that I couldn't give my due to feminist and queer activism. And so I decided to leave to a place that definitely isn't a utopia, but it is easier to live for me where I'm now in the Netherlands and where I did my master's in gender studies. But to answer your question, the geographies of knowledge, and I would really like to start with me in high school and with me having the thinking of, I have to leave Croatia. I cannot be here. The people here are so stupid. There is no good knowledge in Croatia, in the Balkans. The universities are bad, the schools are bad, the professors don't want to do their jobs. It's like a shit show. I have to leave. I have to go somewhere else. I'll go to an American university because that is the pinnacle of higher education, I guess. I'm assuming you can already sense and see where this is going. And it is that I'm very critical now of that like 16, 17, 18-year-old me who had such prejudice towards Balkan and Eastern European education. And to be fair, towards any type of education that wasn't North American and Western European. And now I have a name for that. I know that that is all part of process that Maria Todorova calls Balkanism, and kind of seeing the Balkans and that part of Central Eastern Europe as the other within Europe, seeing it as less civilized, less smart, less capable, less feminist, definitely, because, oh, no way I'm going to study feminism and queer theories in Croatia because it doesn't exist here, I guess. I don't know. No, I was aware that it exists because I was already active with activists in feminism in Croatia, but I wasn't very much aware of feminist academia in Croatia. And I know that that there is a reason I wasn't aware of such academia because it's not very present, it's not very visible. It is truth to that I wouldn't be able to study gender studies and feminist studies in Croatia. There is definitely truth that if I wanted to have a master's degree with that kind of title and, more broad knowledge of those topics, I had to go abroad. But that doesn't mean that the thinking of, oh, Croatia has, and people in Croatia and academics in Croatia have no important knowledge to produce, that still isn't problematic. So now I know it's kind of I see it, sense that in myself, that that was a problematic way of thinking, and that that was kind of holding up, I would say, the American, North American knowledge on a throne that it doesn't necessarily deserve to be, and just ignoring the truth that there is knowledge to be produced elsewhere, and that there are ways of knowledge, that there are ways of knowledge production that differ from what we've been taught from that Western Europe and North American academia. To be honest, I realized that when I came to do my master's in the Netherlands. And my master's in the Netherlands is very much philosophically oriented. It's very much postmodernist. And so my mind was blown, and I had a lot of light bulb moments listening to those lectures, because I came from, you know, from my undergrad, which had amazing professors. It was an amazing university that really gave a lot of chances, that really I think has one of the best, if not the best, financial support for students. So I think it's a really good university, but it still taught me a very normative way of doing science and social sciences in particular. It taught me that positivist approach is the only approach that exists, that objectivity is the ultimate goal of doing science, and that we should always strive to be as objective, as objective, as objective as possible. And then at my master's, you know, becoming familiar with postmodernist thinking, there was like this yeah, like blowing up of everything I've known before, which said, oh, you know, actually it's not possible to be objective. Like, yeah, that's true. That's actually entirely true. Like, how did I not think of that myself? Like, why, you know, why did I not realize that? And shifting my attention towards how being subjective in your research and actually holding that subjectivity and coming from that subjectivity, you know, applying what Donna Haraway calls situated knowledges, how that can inform research, and it can inform science, and it can inform knowledge in a way that's different from the positive science that's been done, but in a way that I believe holds a lot of value. Because being objective is still not, you know, a concept in a vacuum. Being objective in science, to me, kind of means stripping away your identity of color and then going to that normative identity in our society. And the normative identity in our society, the colorless identity, is an identity of a man, white, you know, from global north, cis het, if you want to go that way, human. So you're still not objective, you're still not a non-entity. You are some sort of entity, but you are the entity that we accept as normative and as a status quo. And then, you know, me, who, yes, I am from Europe, I am white, but for example, I'm a woman. So in trying to be objective in doing my research, I'm trying to take the positionality of that normative scientist, right, who is a man and who is not me, instead of acknowledging that I am a woman and that the research that I do, particularly in feminist spaces, will, you know, definitely be informed by that position of being a woman. And so to go back to your question about geographies of knowledge, yeah, I think geographies of knowledge impose a certain way of doing science that has been accepted as the only right way of doing science. But in challenging that, I think there is so much to discover, and I think there is so much knowledge being hidden in the colorful subjectivities. And when we as scientists and researchers allow ourselves those colors, and not only as disclaimers at the end of the research paper, but actually throughout the whole research paper and throughout the whole research process, like from the very beginning, when you start to think about what you're going to research, being informed by your, you know, subjectivity, by your positionality, and by your colorfulness.
I agree totally. The illusion of neutrality that exists in academia specifically and in all fields of science. Like, yes, you have to be neutral, you have to be objective, but it's not neutral. It just the norm is the white cis male hetero, which you just identified. So that's why it feels like every time we move from that norm, It's like a rebellion. It's, oh, you're now making something new up, you're adding some stuff in. The other day I saw somebody very ignorantly commenting, oh, the alphabet people. Like, what are you even talking about? It took me a second to realize what his slur, I guess, was even alluding on. And the only reason why he is offended or upset is because now somebody else is trying to fit into the same space where only he belonged before. So now he just, because all of a sudden it's crowded. Everybody has rights now. What a wild concept. But we fight.
I think people often think that making space for other views, other subjectivities, other identities means taking away from their own, which is not true at all.
And there is the whole issue of adding and stir. Like a society is a soup, and then you just add women, or add disabled people, or add BIPOC people, and then stir, and now that's it. No, you should make a whole meal with all of the ingredients in mind from start, not just add it post making. Speaking of influencing and making stuff, you're very vocal about recent Croatian elections that happened, and now we have an upcoming European elections, which will happen before the people see this video, so they might be confused, but still. You're very vocal about the fact that going to the polls is very important, especially for young people, especially for women, especially for queer folks. So can you please share some examples, perhaps on the example of Croatia and the winning of Domovinski Pokret and them entering into the Croatian parliament? Why is it crucial for people to actually go to the polls and to vote with their own heart and reason and values in mind?
What happened in Croatia is that, yeah, the radical right party won a lot more votes and thus seats that uh, we wanted them to. I mean, one is one too much, but didn't win totally. So the central right party, that is kind of the most popular party in Croatia, has won the most votes, but they are going into the coalition with the radical right party, and that is concerning us a lot. I think it's important for people to go out to the polls. Regardless of their identity. I think it wouldn't be very democratic to say, yay, queer people should go and vote, but hardcore Catholics should not. No, of course, like everybody should go and vote, and that's kind of the point of democracy, right? It's a little bit sad that the 60% of eligible voters came out in Croatia. That is a lot for Croatia, and we still have the results that we are not very happy with. Kind of the expectation from the left was that if a lot more people go out and vote, the results will be more left-leaning, which turned out to not be the case. But I do have a problem with the current state of democracy in the world and in Europe especially. So I'm currently in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands had also parliamentary elections 6 months ago, and now they formed the government. Netherlands is famously takes the longest time to form a government after voting. And it's actually worse than in Croatia. Actually, in the Netherlands, the party that won by far the most votes is Radical Right Party, quite radical, led by Geert Wilders, who fortunately will not be the prime minister. But they are forming the coalition with the party that was on power until now, so that's the central right, and with the Farmers' Party, um, which is also very strong in the Netherlands, right? And another party that I can't think who it is right now. But so I would like to say in the Netherlands, the kind of situation from voting and forming the government is even worse than in Croatia because it's even more right wing. But we see this shift towards the right, and more alarmingly towards very radical right. And I think the issue why we're seeing that is because the democracy and the ways of voting that we have now implemented and practiced in a lot of countries, which is you have the right to vote for the parliament if you have citizenship in that country, make no sense anymore, particularly in Europe, where we are so mobile and we are living in countries that we do not have citizenship of. And, for example, in the Netherlands, after 5 years of living here, I can apply for citizenship, and then I get full rights as a citizen of the Netherlands. I have to give up my citizenship in Croatia. But there is no need for me to do that, actually, because since it's European Union, I basically have all the rights that the Dutch people have besides voting. So there's no reason for me to apply for Dutch citizenship, but I do want to have voting rights for, the parliament, but I can't have that unless I have citizenship. And it's important, I think, in this analysis to realize that the radical right parties are winning a lot of votes based on their stance towards migration. So we are not giving, immigrants, whether we're talking, about highly skilled immigrants, whether we are talking about, low-paid immigrants who are living in countries for a large number of years, we are not giving them the right to vote. And so I don't think that those kind of election results are necessarily representative of the people living in the country at the moment, right? Because if I had the right to vote, if a lot of my immigrant friends in the Netherlands had the right to vote, we wouldn't vote for the party that wants to implement, border control on the borders of the Netherlands and that wants to stop all immigrants from coming into the Netherlands. So yes, we should all go out to vote. And I think wherever you live in a world, because especially when we talk about Croatia, a lot of queer people left Croatia because it's not safe for them to live in Croatia. I think a lot of feminists left Croatia because just your mental and physical health cannot take it. But wherever you are in the world, I think it's important to vote wherever and whenever you can. It's important, for example, in the Netherlands, I voted for the Croatian parliament from the Netherlands. I had to take a train an hour and a half to The Hague, went there, voted in like 3 minutes, and then rode another hour and a half back. It took my whole afternoon after work, but I think it was worth it. And I will definitely be voting in the EU Parliament. And I think the voting for the EU Parliament is actually done a little bit better because for the EU Parliament, you can decide for which representatives you will vote. So me, as a person with a Croatian citizenship, but resident in the Netherlands, I can choose whether I want to vote for the Croatian representatives or the Dutch representatives. Not both. I still only have one vote, but I get to decide where most of my interests lie. And I think that's actually a really good model for thinking, how to go about voting and how to go about democracy and who is, who are elected national representatives actually representing. Because in the current world that is so mobile, they are not representing the people who live in that country.
Thank you so much. There is also an issue in countries like the US, which has certain conditions to be met when it comes to when you're even a born citizen, you can lose your right to vote. If you're incarcerated, considering there is a lot of discrimination in American law system, a lot of people are targeted for the sole purpose of losing their voting rights because they got incarcerated, for example. And the whole thing about the immigrants and about the fact that you have to travel so much. I was also voting from Canada for Croatian elections. We were lucky enough to be in the same city where the elections are held for the diaspora, because it's only in two cities in the whole Canada, both of which are in Ontario, and all of the other people have to travel to those two cities. So an average Croatian in Canada spends around $200 to exercise their voting rights. That's discrimination based on class, but nobody talks about that. And yes, you could argue, well, you left Croatia because you don't like it anymore. Why are you interfering with it? You should just let it go. Like, I was one of those people before the right started rising in Croatia again, and I got scared of it all. Because I believe the same thing. Okay, you decided it's bad for you, you left. Now shut up. Like, go do your thing elsewhere. But then you realize, no, I left, but my family members are still there. I might one day want to come back, and what I'm gonna come back to? Like, what is that world that's gonna be there? And it was so scary to follow Croatian elections now and to see the mandates, who's gonna get what chair. And then when I saw that they're forming a new Ministry of Demography and that Domovinski Pokret is gonna be ahead of it, I literally got scared. Like, I got the goosebumps from fear, because you have no idea what's happening. It feels like Handmaid's Tale, because why? When you know that that is an organization that promotes the lack of choice for women, that wants women to be trade wives locked up in their homes, financially dependent on their husbands, when they want to ban abortion, when they want to de-ratify Istanbul Convention, which is mind-blowing to me that somebody can openly say that, when they want to militarize the community, when they want to teach children about how great it was when Croatia was a puppet state of Nazi Germany 70 years ago. You just have a responsibility to act, and the only way you can act is by voting and by talking about it. And we're talking about it now, then we voted against them, but unfortunately that was just not enough at the moment. And then when you see what's happening in Poland and in Canada, in US and everywhere else with the rise of the alt-right, which is happening because capitalism is ruining it for all of us. Like, we're all struggling right now. We're poorer than the generation before us was. We're less happy. We're more stressed. We're in more danger, exposed to more risk than before. And of course, people turn to familiar things to them, or to people who have all the answers. Like, they know exactly who is to blame. The gays, the immigrants, like, they have their list of, oh, those damn women who want to work, they're at fault. Like, because they people need the type of, I guess, a story, a fairy tale that will explain to them that the world is not as scary place as it seems. Those
We
types
just need
of,
to find the right villain and pick them
yeah.
out. That's
So it's
everything we
easy
need.
to mobilize people to vote for alt-right more than it is for the leftist parties, especially because leftist parties can agree. Like, there are no two leftist parties that can sit down and say, okay, we can agree on all of the dots of our program. Like, that doesn't happen usually, and that's a problem. We have to work on that to find out common grounds so we don't plunge more into the darkness, I guess. Speaking of politics and the governments getting into our uteruses, I want to talk about something that people believe is apolitical and totally outside of the whole political cultural world, but it's actually very political, especially in terms of the rise of the alt-right, and that is sexuality. How did your passion for the topic of sexuality turn into a whole platform on which you advocate for sexual rights, for sexual education and pleasure? And what are some of the biggest rewards and challenges that you got from working in digital spaces on specifically those types of topics that are both very popular, like sex sells everything, at the same time, sex is always censored? So, what do you do?
Well, it is a favorite question of everyone how I got into talking about sexuality because I guess it's supposed to be a story. But it's not a story. I don't know. It just happened. I don't know. I always found sexuality an easy topic, kind of maybe easier than most people do. And I noticed that it is a topic and a space where women's rights are often very present, often negotiated, where women are framed in a certain way, and that also means it is a space where we can reframe how women are framed there, and from which we can fight for women's rights and for women's position in society. My interest in sexuality really came from a lot of different sides. So one is definitely feminist activism. One is definitely as a response to anti-sex work feminists and radical feminists that are anti-sex, anti-straight sex, anti-sex in general. So as a response to that, but also as sexual education that I noticed was missing a lot in Croatia. And I think the trigger for me was when I was talking on my Instagram a long, long time ago about using a menstrual cup and saying how it's a really good tool for when you travel because you can just bring one and you don't have to bring like a whole pack of pads. And I remember this guy who was studying to be like I guess a programmer, like from a very good IT university college in Zagreb. He texted me and he said like, "What do you mean you don't need to bring a whole pack of pads, but you just only need one?" Like, what do you mean? Like for the entire duration of your menstrual bleeding, you don't need one. He was like, yeah, you do." And I asked him, well, you change your underwear daily, so you change your pad at least daily. Here's the cute talk about menstrual poverty. So yeah, we should all have the possibility to change menstrual products, regularly. Uh, and then he said, no, but you don't wear the pad the entire time. You just wear it when you bleed. What do you think happens? Do you think there's like a ding, 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 put it in now for the next 2 minutes? And then what? And then you take it out and you put it in your bag? I don't know.
Imagine if you could just do it like any other bodily function.
Just go to the bathroom now. It's time. I don't know what he thought happens, but I was so perplexed how this 20-year-old man who is obviously smart enough to study at a good college does not know how menstruation functions at all. And that was the thing that triggered to start talking about these, I would say, very, very, very basic things from sexual education, but that you realize are not basic for a lot of people. I didn't study pedagogy. I don't know how to work with kids necessarily. So a lot of my teachings are aimed at adults and young adults. And you would see, these things that I do, like, for example, a video on menstruation, how to use menstrual products. And you would think, well, this is a video for like a 10-year-old. But in reality, this is a video for a 20-year-old because a 20-year-old does not know these things either because it's such a huge taboo topic. And let's not even talk about more sexual topics, right? Such as pleasure, such as consent, such as communication, also a big, big taboo. So it was this different kind of pushes and pulls that got me into talking about sexuality online and working on different projects, which really vary from advocacy projects for comprehensive sexuality education in Croatian schools to more like columns that talk from feminist and queer perspective about like, everyday things or whatever is going on in the world currently. And the challenges of that is that when people see you talking about these things online, they have a certain image of you, and I don't know what necessarily. Well, I do know what they expect. I know they expect it's gonna be some sort of corn situation is gonna be going on. Like when they go on my Instagram and they see like sexuality education and they think, oh, spicy, let's go. And then I'm like, sign the petition for the abortion. I don't know. I guess it's not what they're expecting. Or, and then I'm talking about, you know, not having to shave your legs as a woman. And yeah, it's not necessarily what people expect because they expect some sort of corn situation whenever you are a woman and, you're a woman and there's a sex in the sentence in whichever form. Um, and then from that, people who don't engage in my content will leave comments that are quite nasty and quite hurtful. Thinking about, yeah, I'm gonna read this. Maybe my parents are gonna read this, and like, no, these things are not true. Whatever. Like a lot of misogynistic comments calling for violence, calling for sexual violence against me. And so that's I think that's very scary. It's not happening so much anymore as it was at the beginning. But yes, I think those are the challenges. It's just that the way that people perceive you as soon as you are a woman talking about sex, and as soon as it is a conversation about sex and sexuality, which people don't differentiate, right? But the benefits are also people reaching out and saying, oh, like I I decided to like get a vibrator at the age of 50 and finally have an orgasm. Thank you. Or yeah, or oh, this was like so great. Like for example, a few weeks ago I held a workshop on polyamory in Croatia, and that was really amazing. I think people were really happy with it. They texted me after saying, this is like we need more conversations like this in Croatia, and I'm gonna tell all of my friends to come for it the next time there is one. So I can definitely see like the benefits and the actual good work that this is doing on the individual level. And I think it then definitely is transforming, smaller communities and like expanding that reach to broader and broader communities and the society in general.
I get it. I mean, shout out to my peers in elementary school who gave me a nickname Samantha from Sex in the City because I was sex positive. I was, a virgin as a virgin could be at that time, but I was talking about how maybe one day I might have sex before marriage, and that was too much.
Oh.
It was a small town in rural Croatia, so the values there were not aligned with my own values. So I just put it like that. And just a little fun fact, I guess, to international audience. I was surprised when I came to Canada and people were like, oh yes, sex education, la la la. So there was this class and I was like, wait, like that means you guys are getting sex ed classes? Like what? Because in Croatia, how it works is that sexual education or reproductive health is an additional topic that can be introduced in all of the subjects in school. So any of the 17 subjects that, for example, a gymnasium offers should include some topics on sexual education. So for example, in biology, you might learn what is menstruation, what is ejaculation and things like that. You won't learn what is a clitoris and things like that. It doesn't exist in the textbook. Literally, it's not shown. I will put up a picture here so you can see where female reproductive system ends in Croatia. Then you have religious class, which is a Catholic class, which is a mandatory class for all, if you're not going to the ethics. And you also learn about sexual education in the religious class. And there they teach you how you have to stay pure and clean with your flower untagged until you can give yourself to your husband. And then you have to do it frequently because now it's your wifely duty. So it's a very interesting dynamic of narratives because up until one point you only have to be the virgin woman type of a stereotype, and then once you get married, now you have to be both a mother and a whore and all of the other stereotypes that go with that whole role. So it's wild, and the fact that they are teaching it like that produces people who in adult life can't recognize marital rape. It produces people who have no idea how many holes they have down there, which is mind-blowing to me, or who don't know when ovulation happens, or even that reproductive system in women is not connected to the other systems in the body. Like the other day I saw, I think it was a US congressman, who said he doesn't get it why gyno exams are so expensive and time-consuming when women could just swallow a little camera and then it will take it from the gut into the reproductive system and then they will film it and see what's happening there. And I was like, you voted against women's right to choose when to terminate their pregnancies, but you have no idea how reproductive system works. How is that legal? Like, how can you be given the type of responsibility if you don't have the knowledge that goes with it? Like, what? But yeah, Croatia has a long way to go when it comes to sexual education of any kind, let alone sexual pleasure, which is totally outside of any. It's in the wildest dreams that women could have pleasure in sex too. Like that doesn't exist. But I'm glad that there are some beautiful consequences of you talking about this stuff, of breaking silence and allowing people to see, oh wait, this is normal. I should not feel ashamed. I can speak openly about this. I can allow myself to enjoy stuff. I think that it's a type of revolution, like being able to experience pleasure, because it's not a rational thing. It doesn't give you profits. It's not anything else but something for you. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, it doesn't serve the capitalism nor the nation. So,
which is fascinating because sex sells, but sex sells only under certain conditions in the popular culture, for example. And when you are a woman who is speaking openly about sex and you're not on OnlyFans or somewhere, so like, what's happening here? People are confused. Are you selling yourself or you're not selling yourself? Like, speaking of digital spaces and sexual activities, let's say, one time I saw you mention that when you were dating on Tinder, you actually used a feminist questionnaire to sort the two people and see who might be the best match. Can you please share what the questionnaire was, how did you come up with it, and what were the responses. Like, I'm so curious. And maybe it will help somebody actually find the perfect match for them. And if did it work? Like, do you have your feminist partner now?
Yeah, you make it sound like the feminist questionnaire, like it's this thing I found online. I just came up with like 10 questions that were important to me at that time, and it was very contextualized and very like specific for the time. So it was feminist, yes, but also like very, political in general. So I remember like first thing off the top of my head, it was 2020, I think, and yeah, end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and the COVID vaccine was just gonna start. So one of the questions was like, are you gonna get vaccinated and what do you think about it? Because everybody had an opinion about vaccination on the dating apps. And I was like, I need to like get this out in the open as soon as possible. Because I do not want to like spend 3 days chatting with somebody and then they're like, I don't believe in medicine, whatever. Waste of my time. But so that was like one of the questions. It was kind of just broadly about the context of that time and space. But there were also questions of like, really like what do you think about feminism? And this might be specific to Croatia, I think, where people are, I would say, more ready to say what they think. For example, in the Netherlands, I think there are definitely like, homophobic and misogynistic people in the Netherlands, of course. But I do think that they are aware that this is not something to broadcast. Whereas in Croatia,
It's a badge of honor.
I was in Croatia like 2 weeks ago and I was talking about my new job to people when they ask. Like, I don't necessarily volunteer this information because I know the kind of reactions it's going to have. So I'd be talking like, yeah, I work for this fund, and you know, we kind of work with local organizations. And then they were like, oh yeah, what kind of work do they do? And I was like, well, like women's rights. And then like every person that's not a chosen friend of mine was like, eh, but do they really need more rights? Or like, uh, I am for women's rights, but I'm not for women being superior to men.
Who said that?
Okay. Good to know. No, so I think in Croatia people just voice this kinds of opinion broadly. So it was really for that questionnaire, it was enough to say feminism thoughts and then see what's gonna come out. But I definitely think you could make it more refined for if you live in a society and a community that is aware that misogyny is a bad thing. Like, oh, what do you think of intersectional feminism? Or, are you, do you know what's happening in radical feminist spaces? Or what do you think of TERFs, whatnot? I also had questions, about like gender and, do you believe that like all women have vaginas and that all men have penises? Yes or no? Truth or false? It was kind of like a little tricky question that if you've never thought about like gender and sex and the different mixing and matching of those that can happen, you might not understand the question. But that was also kind of the point. I did want, to date somebody who has thought about these things and with whom I can talk about these things. And the reactions to my questionnaire were very varied, from people who, I remember this one guy who got super upset. And this is, where the questionnaire really shines, because yeah, that's what I was looking for. I am looking for you to get really upset so that I know that I don't want to go out on a date with you, because I don't want to be on like a third date and realize that you're a racist. For example, a great question for the questionnaire that I would make now would be, who did you vote for? Both in the Netherlands and Croatia. It could also be like, oh, do you go to protests? Like, what was the last protest you went to? Why yes, why not? What are your stances on the immigration politics? And these are value questions for me, but they're also questions to see, do we have like common topics to talk about? Because these are topics that I like to discuss on like with my friends and just in general with the people that I choose to surround myself with. And so I was saying one guy got really upset and his response was like, oh, you leftists pretend to be so liberal and accepting of everyone, but you don't really accept people with different opinions. Blah blah blah. You should like give me a chance. This is not right.
Yes, it's left.
Like in my work, I work on creating content that talks about these things, and I work on holding spaces for open dialogue about these things. And like we can talk about that. I am very happy to talk, about these things with people that I encounter in my life. I'm very happy to meet people wherever they are. And if they are ready to really have an open dialogue and not just like to drive their own point home, but if they're ready to have an open dialogue, I'm very happy to do that. I do not want to do that on dates, right? I want to be with somebody that I feel comfortable, that I feel safe with somebody that's gonna challenge me, but not like trying to explain to me how racism is justified, but challenge me in a good way, in expanding my own thinking. I don't want to feel like I'm working. I don't want to feel like, I'm creating educational content while on a date. I don't want to feel, like threatened and unsafe by somebody's opinions. So, I respect your opinions. I'm saying it like this because like some opinions I will respect, like others I will not. If you are racist and misogynist, like I will not respect that. But I will respect wherever you are. And I will engage in an open dialogue with you, but I will not date you. And that stance did come after lots of years of dating people and really like being on that fourth date and then hearing, somebody saying things like, oh yeah, well, my ex had really good feminine energy, so she was doing all the cleaning, and me with my masculine energy was doing, I don't know, all the finances. And I started to laugh at that moment because I was with this person who was, leftist, rocker, very like woke and liberated and whatnot, goes to Pride, whatever. And I started laughing because I thought he was joking. And he got really upset. He was like quite laughing. It was like, you're fucking with me, right? Like I was like feminine and masculine energy. And mind you, this was like a few years ago. This is before the whole concept became so wildly popular in Croatia. So after a lot of years of dates like that and just having really funny stories, but also, feeling like I'm going on dates for the stories and not a genuine connection. The questionnaire did work, and I did meet my partner who did answer in a way that really invited for more conversation. And that was something that I was also not expecting because I did also have people who would answer. And, because you know from my questions, my questions were biased. They weren't really good research questions. They were definitely biased, and you could see like what answer I want to hear. And there were definitely people who just said what I wanted to hear, and you could see, that I would say like that, and there's like no space for further conversation. But the partner that I'm with now, and we've been together for like more than 3 years now. So August answer really in a ways that I wasn't expecting and got me thinking about things. I was like, huh, this actually worked way better than expected. And later I asked August, what did you think about my questionnaire? And August said, well, I either thought you were batshit crazy or you were very, very interesting. I was like,
I
well,
love
let's
it.
see.
I love it. And you're happy now. It worked. Like that's the important thing. You got your person.
I got exactly what I wanted for in terms of I'm learning new things and I'm not, the feminist professor in the house, but we're actually learning from each other and we are both interested in these topics. So I think the questionnaire can really work, but you should be ready for some angry answers.
I can imagine. I had a period of years when I was not scared to say I'm a feminist, but ashamed, if that makes sense, because in Croatia, feminism is so stigmatized, and there is one specific stereotype around feminists, what they look like, what they behave, what they wear, what they're like. And I was like, no, 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 I can't be like that. I was, I guess, my pick me era, if you will. So it was hard to say, no, I'm a true feminist. And on the first date with my now husband, we were talking about what is feminism and is feminism even needed now and am I a feminist? And at that point, I was already negotiating with myself. Yes, I am a feminist, but I'm not a radical feminist. I don't want to indulge in that. So it was hard to find where exactly in the feminist spectrum I belong into. But I think that's very important when you're dating to talk about the stuff because it might seem trivial. Like, oh, what are your thoughts on feminism? It's like it's a BuzzFeed questionnaire or something. Like, oh, what type of feminist are you? But it's important because it impacts your whole relationship and your whole life. Because you will get into situations where if you're having polar opposite values, you'll clash. You won't be able to figure out what you're going to do. If you're going to have a family, who's going to be the primary caregiver in that family? Who's going to work? The finances that you mentioned, which is funny to me because women historically are the ones who deal with finances because it's witchcraft. Like Vikings did it. They gave all of the money to the wives, and then the wives gave allowance to the men because it was considered because it's math, and math is from the devil, so it must be witchcraft. So it's funny that shifted that now finances are a men's thing, but we see it in the research, the sociological research on dating life in the recent years proves how there is now a problem because men and women, if they're in heterosexual relationship, of course, are not aligned anymore. Women are turning more and more to the left because the left offers them the right to choose if they want to be a wife, if they want to be a mother, if they want to work, the workers' rights, the prenatal care and all of that. The left promises them that sexual abuse will be prosecuted and things like that. And then the men are turning more to the right, especially under the influence of the manosphere and Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and all of the other buddies, Chads, whatever, who are promising the man that no, you have to stick to the true masculine values. You have to be in your masculine energy. The woman has to be in her feminine energy. You have to protect her. I think we best saw it in the bear discussions last few weeks, like the man or the bear, because so many people didn't get it. Like why the woman chose the bear, and by not getting it, they proved that women should choose a bear. Like. It's so sad. Like, yes, a woman does want to have a say in when she has sexual relations. A woman wants to have a say in what type of protection she uses in that relation, or what happens if there is an unwanted consequence of that relation. But then on the other side are people who are trying to strip you of those rights, and then it's hard. Why would you be in a relationship like that? Why would you live in a country like that, let alone in an intimate relationship where all types of violence can occur, especially in Croatia, in the Balkans. In the last few years, we see a rise of femicides, and that is directly tied to the clash between the values, because a woman wants to leave when she realizes that she's being abused, and then she can't leave. She becomes entrapped, and somebody attacks her because they can't deal with the fact that now she's leaving all of a sudden after years of abuse. So it is very important to talk about those values beforehand so that we can protect ourselves, protect each other, and get into relationships that are actually meaningful and have any type of future. I mean, if you're looking for a one night stand, even then I wouldn't say that it would be like safe to go with anyone because there is a lot of violence that can happen even in these types of situations. So I believe it's hard. I wouldn't. I'm happily married. I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with any of that type of dating struggles anymore because it sounds super scary, like super scary. For our segment Feminist Recommends, can you recommend any type of literature, media, research, or whatever that brings you joy, that educates you, or that you just believe everybody should know about because it's a staple when it comes to the feminist life?
This is something that I got from my partner because they really enjoy video essays. So I'm getting into that now as well. And I think that's that's something that I would like to recommend. I think it's not a very common type of academic source that we look into, but I think it can be very, very, very valuable. So I would recommend Philosophy Tube, ContraPoints, and Dr. Fatima for different, queer and feminist and decolonial kind of topics. I think they all have amazing video essays, and these are, quite long, and the work that goes into them, like the references list, these are like PhD level types of research that goes into it. So yeah, I think I would definitely suggest that because I think that's easily digestible, even if you're not in the academic spaces, even if you're not, familiar with reading academic jargon and academic language. And it's often produced in a very nice way. And if you're here and watching this podcast on YouTube, then you probably have an interest in watching stuff on YouTube. So I think this will be right up your alley.
People can see your own educational content and activist content because it's super important. You combine Croatian and English in your content, so I think it will be accessible to a lot of people then. But I think it's important to find accessible ways of sharing knowledge because not all of us have a privilege and an opportunity to go to school, specifically to go to feminist studies. Like there are some privileges that should be addressed that provide you with that opportunity, that give you time, that give you money for it, and that you don't have to worry about your job security and things like that. Like it's not open to a lot of people. It's like in the realm of art studies. I would even go as far to compare. It's like a free form discipline, if you will. So you can be anything with it and everything, but there is not one path that you can follow and you're sure that it will work. So a lot of traditional parents or societies even look down on it because they're not sure what it is. So it's a whole thing. But anyway, I believe that video essays or videos like this even can give people, if you're commuting to work or whatever, or just need some time to unwind, to indulge in content that gives information and that provides support and safe space in which you can just be. I think that sometimes also we need that. And it's free. So it's hard to find free content, free anything to do lately. So
Yeah, I would say if you can afford it, support content creators. I know that the creators that I have mentioned, some of them, if not all of them, also post on Nebula, which is a paid platform which gives the process to creators. But if you can't afford that, that's why all of these creators also post it on YouTube, and it is free for viewers, exactly to make all of that knowledge accessible.
you can always follow them and like their content and support them in that way because then algorithm pushes them up. You could also like and subscribe to this channel as well while we're at it, so you miss some future episodes. I just also want to ask you, what are some feminist practices in everyday life that you use to make your life more feminist, if you will, more inclusive, more safe, more fun, besides the feminist questionnaire on Tinder?
I would say just engaging in those conversations whenever I do have the chance and the resources, meaning time, energy, emotional capacity. And sometimes it can feel like those conversations are not going anywhere. Like, when I tell people what I do and then they have a misogynistic answer to that, unprovoked. But I do think that also those conversations, little by little, they will lead to some personal and societal change. I would also say deconstructing the things we have internalized and the knowledge we have, and kind of circling back to the first question of where the knowledge is produced and what do we think, is the right knowledge and the right way to do science and the right way to do things and the right way to do relationships and love and, whatever. Just thinking about that. And yes, it's a very, also privileged thing, because to think about your internalized sexism and homophobia and racism and transphobia takes time and takes energy. But if you do have that capacity, I think that is a very valuable thing to do, both for yourself to understand who you are and what your positionality is in the world, and to understand your relationships with others. And I think that is what I'm trying to do. It is very humbling. It is very difficult for the ego, especially when you are in this sort of human rights spaces, right? And you think, oh, I'm a feminist. Um, I engage in like anti-racist activism, I engage in queer activism, and then being confronted with something and realizing your own internalized misogyny and racism and homophobia and transphobia, because we all have it. We all live in a society that is like that and that internalizes those values into us from the moment we are born. If not before we are born, with the gender reveal parties and stuff.
Oh, don't get me started.
And it is definitely like work to de-internalize and deconstruct these things, and it is definitely difficult, because it's also like, oh, maybe I'm not such a good feminist as I thought I am. But to be a good feminist, I think, is to do that kind of internal work, because that is what is going to come out with your relationships with other people, in your research, in your activism, in whatever, in what anything that you put out into the world. That is what I'm trying to do on daily. While also, I would repeat, just meeting people where they are. And if I'm understanding of the fact that I have all this internalized isms because of the society I was brought up in, I need to understand that other people were brought up in that same society, maybe did not have the opportunities that I had. As you said, it takes privilege to think about these topics. It takes privilege to study these topics. Not to start, feminist books are expensive. It takes privilege to study, to read, to think, to have the time, to have the energy, to even be surrounded with people who, my partner who said like, oh, do you want to watch, this, video essay on J.K. Rowling and then talk about it. So to have somebody who's going to introduce you to things and also be the person you can talk to about those things, it's all a privilege, and it's all a part of a context that we are brought up in and that we find ourselves in. And so if I understand that for myself, I think I need to understand that for the others as well, and meet them where they are with like as positive outlook as I can. And it definitely takes a lot of work, um, because I don't always agree with people on things that I find very important. But I do think that's my little, micro feminist efforts, day in, day out.
That's beautiful. I appreciate how you noted that everybody is unique and everybody has the right to be wrong, if you will. like, everybody's pet is different, so somebody might realize that other people are people too when they're a child. Some might figure it out when their prefrontal cortex develops until fully. Some might figure it out when they're lying in the bed waiting for death to come one day, and then realize, oh wait, all of the other people have went through all the same process as well, so we're all the same. It hits people at different points in life, but it's important that it hits them. That at one point they actually realize that everybody else is also valuable. One of the fascinating things that I noticed here in Canada with feminism is how the public is shocked when feminists here lead the anti-incarceration protests or agendas or whatever, because they're like, wait, you're against rape and you want to punish that type of behavior, you want to stop it from happening, but you're against life in prison, you're against death sentence, you're against injections or this or that. Like, yeah, because that's dehumanizing people. Like, we're not putting ourselves above other people. You have to help everyone in the whole process, and it's better to prevent than to start a new cycle of violence that will then continue into something else. And we see that now with the genocide that's happening as well. it's all connected, just on different scale, the same type of discussion that we're having.
I just also like to say here that there are also carceral feminists, right? So, and I think that also, ties what you mentioned earlier when you were talking to your now husband on your first date about, are you a feminist and what kind of feminist you are. I think a lot of people don't realize that there is no the feminism. I think a lot of feminists don't realize there is no the feminism, that it is an umbrella term under which a lot of different philosophies and practices and views lie. And so it's just a trigger for me, when somebody asks me, oh, but you're not a radical feminist, and they don't know what that actually means. They don't know that radical feminism is a certain, philosophy of feminism. They think it's feminism that is radical, meaning you don't shave your legs. So radical. But yeah, just I always like to say this when we have any sort of conversation around feminism, and that's why I like to highlight that I come from, and I try to come from, intersectional feminism, queer feminism, and sex positivist feminism. And there's definitely no other feminist thoughts that I don't agree with and that go directly against, sex positive feminism in particular.
Yeah, I appreciate that you mentioned that because it's hard. One of that's why in the intro I say that we're answering some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, because there is no definition. Like there is no definition that can just show to the people and say here it is. This is feminism. No, all of it is feminism. Just different types of flavor, like ice cream. So you pick and choose your flavor, I guess. But to some you might be allergic to. Let's just put it like that. For me, radical feminism is a flavor that I'm allergic to as well.
Will kill you.
Yeah. Or just make you not feel so well. One thing I just want to add with the feminist practices in everyday life. You're originally from Croatia, and Croatian language is a gendered language, which is mind blowing to a lot of people. Francophones understand; they have they have it too, but Anglophones not really. And even in English, it's a whole debate of is they an appropriate noun, which is a stupid discussion to have because what's appropriate is defined by the person who is seeking a specific type of recognition. So if they say something is appropriate to them, it's appropriate. But they're still confused. But in Croatia, we have he, she, it gendered pronouns on everything, on every noun is in its form of gender, which causes some funny discrepancies. And you have ways of fighting against that very symbolically in practice. So, would you like to share how you started doing it and how do people react when you say for you and your partner, who is a male, that you are a group of people in the female form of the word?
This is a complicated talk to have in another language.
Yeah.
So basically, the norm in Croatian language is the masculine. So if you have a group of people that are men and women mixed, or you don't know who you're talking about, you're going to talk to about them in a masculine form, right? Um, and what I started doing, because I was introduced to it by a friend who's active in queer activist spaces, is challenging that by using the feminine form. So if I'm talking about somebody that I don't know the gender of, I'm gonna mix masculine and feminine. And I think you can see that as well in English academic lit. I don't know if you noticed this, but like before, older articles, when it to be talked about a researcher, like, some research says, and then the researcher would be he. But then I noticed in some academic papers, they start referring to this abstract researcher who's like not gendered as she. So you can see this shift of what the norm is. Norm is not masculine anymore, it's becoming feminine, or we're just switching between the two. And so I'm trying to do the same in the Croatian language, talking in a feminine tense about a mixed group of people or about an abstract subject whose gender or pronouns I don't know. Um, And yeah, the reaction to that is a lot of like, oh, what are you talking about? Or did you mean the masculine? I was even working on one, started working on one project when I tried to do that, and the collaborator I had was like not understanding. She was from Serbia, and she asked me like, oh, in Serbian, like the masculine is the norm. Is the Croatian different? I was like, no, the Croatian also the masculine is the norm, but I'm deliberately using feminine now, or changing them. So people aren't really understanding, and they ask, and I explain, and some of them are like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. But others have a different type of reaction, and they react, this is wrong, this is not correct, the language is not correct, which is a very silly thing to say, because what is, language is a live thing, and we are creating it and we are changing it. And so it's not only, what you said about the pronoun they. I mean, singular they exists in the English language since the 14th century. It's correct grammar. The argument that it's not grammatically correct is not even true. But it might not have been, as commonly used as, for example, singular you was also developed around the same time as singular they in the 14th century. But singular you in the English language is super common now, right? Everybody's using it. Singular they are using it, but they don't realize they are using it, right? So in English, this is becoming more common now. And then the argument of like, oh, but this isn't common, or this sounds weird, doesn't make sense, because the language changes based on the way how we use it and what becomes normal for us. Like, I'm not a linguist, obviously. Maybe you find a linguist for another episode to talk more about this. But from a feminist perspective, and this is also a great example of how feminism like goes into everything. And one person who was critiquing me on this said like, oh, what, now you're a linguist as well? I was like, well, no, but it's all about feminism. We can do feminist theory and feminist history, but really, you don't go study gender studies to learn history and theory. You go to study it and you work on it to realize how to implement it in everything else that you do. Um, so yeah, so a lot of responses are like, oh, this is not correct, this is not true, it's just wrong. And I don't agree with things in language being wrong. They might not be per standard of the standardized grammar at the moment, doesn't make them wrong necessarily. But yeah, it is I wouldn't say an uphill battle, because like, using this now for a few years, it became quite common to me. It might be a little annoying when people keep asking, but the reason I'm using those forms and changing the normative gender in Croatian language is so people would ask, and is so I could have these conversations and explain that. And I think that is exactly the example of, educating on small things and having conversations on small things and making it accessible and making it bite-sized and easy. And some people are going to be very upset about that, and they're going to keep like drumming the beat of this is not correct, this is not correct grammar. But other people are going to be like, oh, this is so interesting, I never thought about this, but I'm going to think about it now. And to me, that's what feminism is about.
Yeah, sometimes the only thing that we can do is just spark a conversation, and then something might come out of it. Maybe not at the moment, but the person will sit with that. They might see it a few more times and then realize, oh, wait, this is actually fine. I'm okay with this. It doesn't harm anybody, but it includes other people, so maybe it's a good thing. Shocking. You're planting seeds, and something might come out of it. And something that's the best you can do, and it's beautiful. And when it comes to the language, because Croatian is so gendered, I, for example, experienced something that I talked with professors here in Canada because it felt weird, I guess. I had to write a lot, of course, for my PhD studies, but I found myself being more open and honest in English, more brave, let's say, or I don't know, robust, if you will. I sound more like a man. That's what I'm trying to say without saying it, okay? And I was like, wait, how did it happen? Like, it felt like a crisis because I felt like losing my own voice because I was used to another voice of mine. And then it took me a hot second to realize that what is actually happening is me adjusting to another language which functions on another grammatical rules, because Croatian is so gendered and the society is very patriarchal. So what I would do in Croatia was to hide my own gender. If I was writing and wanted to be taken seriously as a researcher, as a scientist, which, fun fact, scientist is a word that describes women, fun historical fact. Anyway, I would hide it. I would use neutral language, or I would even use masculine language or masculine forms of words to hide that I'm a woman, because my opinion would be worth less if people realize that the author of the text they're reading is a woman. And in English, I just write. It takes so less time because I just write. And I dare to say stuff that I otherwise wouldn't dare, because nobody sees that I'm a woman, so I can have my own opinion heard. It's something that I'm still working on myself. Like realizing that I've been censoring myself for so long, and now it's like, oh, I'm set free. Like, what's happening? But even English has troubles. Even in English, gender finds its way. The other day I was reading a guidebook on art, on color, on watercolors or whatever, and almost every sentence had like, oh yes, the artist when he mixes the color, or when he draws on his paper, when he prepares his canvas. Like, why did you include it? You didn't have to include it. You have more words than you were supposed to have. You went out of your way to make it seem like the only type of artist that can be is a man. But I mean, okay, it was a vintage guidebook from the 70s, so let's say it was a product of its time, whatever it means. But it's funny how the language has a power of shape how we think of ourselves, of our thoughts, and how those thoughts then come to be the actual spoken word.
There's a lot of value in, thinking about language proactively and using language with intention, because exactly what you just said, it has a lot of power over us and our perception of ourselves and the world.
And in the end, I would like to ask you if you have any final thoughts, any messages, any calls for action, or whatever that you'd like to share with the audience. And now is the time to do it.
I'd like to invite everybody in Europe to sign the petition. We are going to put the link in the description to make abortion accessible throughout the European Union. The petition is going to be active until 2025, so there is time for you to sign when watching this. It addresses the fact that in a lot of EU member states, abortion is either not legal at all, or it is theoretically legal but not accessible, as it is in Croatia. And the effort now is to gather 1 million signatures and present this petition to the European Commission so that the European Union can work on actually making abortion accessible and possible for everyone throughout the European Union.
Please go sign down below. It is a beautiful action that united a lot of people around Europe, and it made me actually proud of Croatia for once, which is shocking, because on the day when the March for Life was happening, which was organized by organizations that actively work against women's rights in Croatia, while that was happening, while people were marching for that, in the digital spaces, you and other fellow content creators were actually doing a campaign on collecting the signatures, and you collected 20,000 signatures in 24 hours, which is beautiful. Like, to see that there is 20,000 people in Croatia who are so active and consistent with their fight and vocal about it, it makes me proud. Which is,
Me too.
again, something that is not something we can often say for Croatia, so that's nice. Thank you, Paula, once again for being here, for sharing with us your thoughts, your experiences, the knowledge that you have that comes from your valuable experiences. And I hope that it will inspire some people to talk about the topics that we talked about. They might open their minds to other forms of discourses, other forms of experiencing education and pleasure as well, both of which is important in today's world more than ever. If you enjoyed watching this, please leave a like, maybe even subscribe so you don't miss on future uploads. Please indulge in the discussion in the comments down below, but make sure to be mindful of other people's feelings and rights. Any type of hate speech or violence will not be tolerated. And I want to ask you to just be kind. Like sometimes the only thing that you can do is be kind and listen to others and hear what they actually have to say and then respond in a respectful way. And it's free. Again, one of the last free things that we can do in this late stage of capitalism. So why not do it together in the comments down below? Thank you, Paula, once
Very much, Aurora, and I'm looking very much to listening to all the other episodes and guests.
Oh yes, there will be some super exciting guests. And the previous episode was on the sex workers' rights, so it's thematically tied with this one, so you can check that one out too. Bye!